Hello, sophomores. This is Mr. Wood. I'm going to talk to you about our assignments that are going to be due this week, and this is going to be one post for the entire week, Monday through Friday, the 18th to the 22nd, on colonialism and slavery, mostly looking at part 2 and a little bit at part 3. So let's start off with what you should have done already before you can really get into this week. Now, what you need to have done is you need to have part 2 of your notes should be done on your packet. Now, if you want to open your packet, there's several spots on here where you can open up your packet, but you should have it saved already as your own Google Doc. So if we have it, we look at it, and part 2 is from pages 6 all the way to page 12. So if I look on here from page 6 to page 12, I can see I have all the notes on basically what happens when the Europeans, like the Spanish and the Portuguese, travel to Africa and end up bringing Africans as slaves to the Americas. Now, why? As you saw in a lot of your reading and from previous chapters, when the Europeans first came, they got gold, they got a lot of resources, silver from the indigenous people, and then they ended up using the indigenous people as slave labor. Unfortunately, because of diseases like smallpox and just the hard cruelty of slave labor and the fact that indigenous people could escape, they wanted a new source for labor. And that is why they turned towards the west coast of Africa. Now, we had talked about before in previous chapters how Africa did have slavery. It was more like slavery that you would see like in the Roman Empire, which at one time had 1/3 of its people being slaves, where maybe you may have been a slave because you lost a battle, might have been a slave because you owed a debt. When the Europeans came, they had a new form of slavery called chattel slavery, which meant that you were a slave for life. And if we look at this picture here especially, we can see where many people from Africa were brought all over to the Americas. And what's really shocking is when you look at this, for a lot of people in America, they don't realize that the majority of Africans who were enslaved were actually brought to places like Brazil in South America, the Caribbean, Jamaica, Haiti, those places. And like I've told this before in class, it's not people from Jamaica and Haiti. Most of the majority of the population there is of African descent. You know, a lot of people think they're dark because it's hot there or something, but no, they're people of African descent who were brought there and forced, taken away from their homes as slaves. So part 2, you should have your notes done already for that. So let's take a step back. Your notes should be done there. And you also should have, from last week's post, you should have done the Flipgrid question. Now, the Flipgrid question is up here for you to record your response orally, which you may do. There's 12 great responses there. And I got even a larger number on email. A lot of people are kind of scared of talking out loud. So I got a number of responses there. If you haven't done that yet, go ahead and just go here under last week's post. And here where it's Flipgrid question, answer that question using your information from part 2 of your notes and how you think it ties to today. All right, so now that we talked about the Flipgrid, we've talked about the notes, let's talk about what is due this week. Monday, the first day, what you should have done on Monday by 11:59. You need to have your CEE graphic organizer done. Now, the graphic organizer is for part 2, and part 2 is right here. It says explain what changes happen as African slavery grew in the Americas in the early modern era. So you will have to label what are like the big changes that happen. So you find, let me just take a step back there. You find your class, so if you're in my 8th period class, you're right here, just like we've done for all the graphic organizers, and you find your name on there, and you fill out your part of the graphic organizer. So here's part 2, right there. So you find your name, and then you go to part 2 under your name, and it says, explain what changes happen as African slavery grew in the Americas in the early modern era. Now, the thing about when you fill this out is you also have access to see anybody else's. So if you're like, I don't get it, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, look at other people's answers here, and you can see their ideas. When you think about claims, I mean, think about the huge changes that happen as Africans are brought as slaves over to the Americas and to do the work, the labor that happens, who benefits out of this, who gets hurt out of this. I mean, you could do a claim like so-and-so people were hurt because of African slavery, while blank people were helped. Something like that. So make your own claim. Think of topics like we've done for class before. Make a claim, and then have evidence from your videos and your readings to back it up. Now I want to get to this next part, explanation, because you guys have done a real good job in the papers I've been grading on evidence. Explanation, not as much. So explanation, this is your part to be original. I remember sharing papers with you earlier in the year where the explanation was put in the beginning. You could do like a context explanation, explaining this time period. You could even write everything that happened that led up to African slavery. Going back a packet, talking about the technology, the innovations, the indigenous people, how they were treated. You could make a connection to today, showing consequences of what happens when you take an entire group of people and tell them they're slaves, tell them they're less than human, make them work and die for you. I mean, that's huge. You could write about, do we see that in our society today? Is there still discrimination and racism? So those are some possible ideas. If there's any other connections that you could make, forced labor, Great Wall of China, or something like that, go ahead and make that. This says explanation, but it's also kind of analysis. You're kind of analyzing the evidence, making connections, and making it your own. This is where you can be original. You know, you can be original and you can put your own thoughts here. And the more original, the more thoughts you have here, the better grade you're going to get. So, otherwise it gets kind of boring just putting fact after fact after fact. This is kind of like the so what? Why is this important to us? All right, so that should be filled out by Monday at 11:59. Now, if you get it done on Tuesday, it's not the end of the world, but you definitely need to get that done. All right, and now I'm going to give you until Thursday, and that's the due date to write your paragraph. So that means you go to Google Docs, you open a Google Doc, and you put your claim, evidence, explanation. Now, it doesn't have to be in that order. You could put explanation first. You could talk about the racism that exists today, and then go into your claim, and then go into your evidence if you want to do that. Be original, be creative. Enjoy this if you can. The writing process, probably not the content. The content's not very enjoyable. All right, so that is due by Thursday at 11:59, and that is up on turnitin.com where you turn that in. Lastly, let's look at the rubric here for your paper. All right, so for part 2, the way it's graded is the same as the last one was that was sent to those who finished their work. 2 points for the flip grid. So if you just decide not to do the flip grid, you're just not going to get the points. You're going to get a 0 out of 2. 2 points for your graphic organizer. That's the graphic organizer under your hour and under your name that you have to fill out, the CEE graphic organizer. So if you don't do that, you'll get a 0. If you do it well, you'll get a 2. And then you're graded as claim, evidence, explanation, and also with your readability and grammar right there. And that is how you'll be graded. Now we're almost done for the week, but we got one more little bit here of homework for the entire week. So lastly, what you need to do is you need to finish taking notes on your packet. So by Monday next week, May 25th, when you're coming back, watching your next video I make for Monday, May 25th, what you will need to have done by then is part 3 of your notes should be done. That basically means you take notes on the rest of it. So what does that look like? That's from page 12, where it starts talking about diffusion. And then you take notes on the rest of it. And we're going to use that for our final assessment on, well, maybe the final assessment on this packet. I got a multiple choice thing I might be throwing at you in a little bit. So page 12, where are we at here? Cultural diffusion. Yep, cultural diffusion in Latin America. You'll start that and take the notes all the way to the end and have that done by Monday at 11:59. So those are our assignments for the whole week. If you have any questions, you may email me. You may talk, and many people have benefited from having Zoom conferences with me. Sometimes it's better to talk to me in person. We can go through it. As long as you're doing your work, you're putting forward, you're caring, you're trying to get this done, your grades are going to be fine. So reach out to me if you need to. Otherwise, hope you guys have a good week, and I will talk to you later.